speaking and listening work is vital to language development, especially in a multilingual environment like Swanley School, East London. But it can get sidelined in favour of more trackable reading and writing exercises.
20% of students' marks for English GCSE are for their speaking and listening work. But up until that point, they've gone through the whole of primary education and the whole of Key Stage 3 with the notion of assessment and real work associated with writing, with the production of written text by students.
John Yandell is visiting Swanley to mentor one of his graduates, Kate Bomford.
Kate did the PGC English course at the Institute last year and I was her tutor on the course. So I was interested in following up to see how she was progressing in her first year as a fully qualified teacher. She became very interested in bilingual students in particular, who make up the vast majority of the pupil population in the school where she's now working. For bilingual students acquiring full fluency in English, an explicit, full focus on speaking and listening has a particular payoff. Kate, could you tell me a bit about the class that we're going to be seeing?
At least 90% of the class are EAL, and most of those students will be Bangladeshi, although not all of them. I always try and work some speaking and listening into every lesson, so even if it's just a brief pair work task. But what tends to happen is that when we open up discussion of the book, it tends to be the same group of students who tend to offer their opinions on it. One of my aims in the lesson that you're going to be watching is to set up a group task that'll actually encourage discussion by everybody.
OK, now let's go in and settle down quickly and quietly.
This Year 8 class have been reading and working on 3 main characters from the novel Holes.
Culturally, it's been very interesting. Some of them have picked up the fact that it's an American book.
I'd like you please very quickly to write down everything we know so far about the warden in your books and do it as a spidergram. I've started you off here and I'd like you to work in pairs, please.
One of the things about speaking and listening is that it is terribly difficult to assess because it disappears. So one of the wonderful opportunities that filming students in the course of speaking and listening activities opens up is the possibility of capturing what's actually happening at a micro level in the classroom. Although you said very clearly this is a pair activity, because their focus was on what was in their own individual exercise books, for most students it became a silent individual activity, not a collaborative activity. And there was a little bit of kind of whispering, almost as if it wasn't really allowed to collaborate. And I was struck by the contrast between that and the main activity, where the way you'd set it up meant that collaboration was kind of inevitable, because they were sharing one set of statement cards amongst the group.
So go ahead, open your envelopes, you can start sorting and I'll bring round your sugar paper now.
The main activity involves sorting statements about 3 main characters: the protagonist Stanley, the quiet and illiterate Zero, and the fearsome Warden. Whether the statements are true, false, or not important will then throw up ideas to use in answering questions about motivation and character.
These questions on the board, can you see I've got 7 questions on the board here? And I want you to use your thinking and your ideas about these statements to help you answer these questions. I'm going to give 1 question to each group, all right? So, Davina's table, can you answer question 1, please? And
they think he's stupid, but he isn't.
Zero is worthless. That's
what's that? What's that? Apple's worthless.
They think he's a waste of time.
Why does Stanley refuse to help Zero learn to read?
So that is an interesting and quite surprising group from my point of view, and it's great to see them working so well together.
And Shazida's role in that is really key. Because she is effectively leading it, isn't she? When Shazida's looking up at the board as well, one can see how she's relating the cards to the question that they're answering, and then pulling Lewis and Kenny back into it.
And they can see each other's thinking, can't they?
Yes.
And I was very pleased that Lewis and Kenny participated so much in that lesson. And later on, we don't see this, but they were very keen to read, and they've not been keen to read in my lessons so far.
0 is the strongest word I can't relate, but 0 is very good. They say he's got nothing in his brain because he never speaks. Isolated.
But hang on, slow down again a bit, a moment. Who's the fastest digger?
0.
They want to just put them in the right categories.
To complete the task.
Yeah, to complete the task.
Sure, that makes perfect
and
sense.
so what I think you inevitably end up doing as classroom teacher is zooming around the groups, slowing the process down, saying, just as you saw me doing there with Janae. No, I mean, maybe that's not strength.
He never ever speaks.
But is speaking to do with being strong?
So out of the group, he's like the weakest.
Oh, so you're interpreting that as like who's got the social power, who controls the group.
Yeah.
The fact that they interpreted it as social strength, as who's got the social power, is terribly interesting. It's interesting in terms of their reading of wholes and the reading of the dynamic of the group of boys in wholes. That they are more interested in that than the question of who's got the biggest muscles.
Yeah, sure, definitely.
Does everyone agree with all of these?
Yes.
It helps when I talk. I have to say my thoughts out aloud. The bit I liked about the lesson was when we worked in the group, because we could work with everyone and they could tell us whether their opinions, which somehow helps. It helps me learn. This is false. That's true.
Is that true, false, or not important?
Not important.
Okay.
But it's false as well.
And it's false, yeah. But if it's not important, you can leave it out of the discussion now, yes?
But what's going on there with you and Aisha is another aspect of differentiation which also exists because of the kind of collaborative group activity that you've set up. But you can say things to her, you can push her harder in that oral interaction than you could do if you're managing the whole class in a kind of...
Absolutely.
Standing by the board front of class.
And in a way, my focus on her there was quite deliberate because she's a very, very intelligent, very articulate girl who often doesn't get as much out of lessons as she should, I think. And I was aware of not pushing her exactly, but engaging quite deliberately with her in a
very serious conversation.
Yes.
It says, what are the differences between 0 and Stanley? How is that different?
The scribing role isn't necessarily the dominant role.
Nevertheless, I wouldn't necessarily have expected Cabral to be taking it, because it's a responsible role nevertheless, isn't it?
There is the opportunity, because of the way that you've set up the task, for students to use questioning of each other in a way that doesn't happen that often, probably, in their experience of formal schooling.
Patrick and Nay, did you agree with the girls, everyone? No. That I was going to say I'd be a bit surprised if you did. Is it important, though, for our Stanley and 0 discussion?
No, it isn't. Got nothing to do with 0.
Yeah, absolutely. Or nothing to do with our subject or our theme of 0 and Stanley?
We had a bit of disagreements with the phrases and what piles they went in.
You need to have more listening and speaking skills to explain something which is very hard.
Let's get back to Stanley. You say he's kind, but you also say he's changed. He's changed physically, mentally and emotionally, yeah?
It's easier to listen, but I think people like to talk more because they like getting their opinions across.
In what ways has he changed?
He's more stronger.
Stronger, yeah.
You're never going to get all the groups functioning perfectly all the time. You were working quite hard to attempt to bridge the gap between the two girls and the two boys.
The way I'd set up the seating plan previously, I think Patrick and Nahid hadn't been together as far as I remember. So that was a last-minute adjustment because we had our new student, Patricia.
Halima is clearly leading the group.
What else do you guys think?
It's such a mixed ability group within a mixed ability class, and you have Patricia as a new arrival with just about no English, as I understand it.
That's right.
But she's absolutely involved in that group. And one can't think of a richer environment for her to be beginning to acquire English than the one that you've provided and the one that her peers are providing within that group.
So let's go through these questions one by one. So let's start off with Dilwar's table. And you're answering number 1, shake. Can you tell me a difference between Zero and Stanley? Well, several differences between Zero and Stanley. You've got lots written down, I think.
Zero is much stronger than Stanley.
Yes, good, excellent, thank you. Anything else? There are lots of differences, aren't there? What else did you have? Cameron?
Zero is stupid, whereas Stanley is clever.
Okay, interesting. Can we open that up to the whole class? Anyone else have anything to say about that? Lots
Zero
I can see.
is isolated.
In what way is Zero isolated?
He's lonely because no one doesn't talk to him.
As opposed to Stanley, who...
One of the things I was trying to do in the feedback session was to target students who I don't normally target. But it was great being able to do that, knowing that they'd all had the chance to rehearse their thinking and their responses to something.
Like, most people can read and write, whereas he can't. And he probably thinks that Stanley is better than him, and other people think that as well.
I think that's very well put, Halima. And his not being able to read and write might, as you say, be one of the reasons why he feels left out. Mine too. Good, excellent. Anything else that you had down?
Worthless.
Worthless. Makes him feel worthless. Yeah, absolutely.
I wasn't expecting this at all, but it was great.
You were prompting individual students to speak, but it was a huge bonus that Patricia had been set up by her group so that she could demonstrate to the whole class that she was an active participant. She belonged there too.
Does the fact, though, that he chooses Stanley to help him to learn to read, does that mean he actually likes him?
Everyone's finding out about him now, so everyone probably thinks of him as new.
What does anyone else think? Do you think Zero does like Stanley? Halima?
Zero feels that he can talk to Stanley and communicate with him very well. Like, talk to him and, like, basically tell him how he feels and stuff.
I think that's true. Question number 6, which was Junaid's table. Yes? What did the other boys think of Zero?
They gave him a nickname and everything. They started to make friends with him. But Zero, he's very quiet and they never used to speak with him that much. And he never used to speak that much as well.
Because he's like quiet and don't speak. I think we should be given time to talk because we're the ones basically learning. It would be kind of boring if it's always the teacher talking, we're just writing. It wouldn't be that much fun.
That's a good way of putting it, Patrick.
They needed the space to talk and listen to each other, to develop the ideas that were coming out as the lesson progressed. And that's that process aspect of speaking and listening activities, of what it enables students to do with language and with their thoughts, is kind of central to what was going on.
It's really given me something to build on, I think, this lesson, because it's introduced them to a particular kind of format of tasks.
Homework. Can you all get your homework diaries out, please?
Speaking and listening skills are not taken as seriously as reading and writing within the English curriculum. The default language mode is to write answers to written questions in relation to bits of written or printed text. This means that speaking and listening has tended to be regarded as the Cinderella of language modes.
Can you stand quietly behind your chairs, 8L, tuck them in?
That if we're serious about enabling our students to get better as language users, we need to give them the quality time to talk together in the classroom.
Who's travelling diary? I've forgotten about it, actually.